The white snakeroot can be a bit of a controversial plant, but it's also a native plant. It's a plant that has some positive attributes, but it also can carry a couple of potential cautions as well. And I'm going to talk about all that in this video. So here we have the white snakeroot, or Ageratina altissima. And of course, this is a plant that is native to North America, but this plant can also be poisonous. So if we're on a landscape where there are going to be a lot of people or a lot of kids, right, this is definitely a plant that we'd want to be cautious about. And then also on that note, if we have cattle or other types of livestock similar to that, this can also be a plant that we might want to think twice about incorporating into that landscape. Usually most herbivorous mammals will tend to avoid it, but sometimes either through carelessness or desperation for food, sometimes this plant can end up being consumed, right, by animals such as cattle, like cows. And when that happens, a particular chemical that is in white snakeroot will find its way into the milk and will produce this toxic substance, especially for humans if they're to consume that milk, right? That is where one of the diseases that came about it is termed milk sickness, right? And that's where this whole thing came from. And it can be fatal. So many of these poisonous plants out there, or at least poisonous for humans, can carry with them some cautions. And these cautions may inspire us to not have it on the landscape, to not introduce it into the landscape, or to get it off of that local landscape. But it's also important to keep in mind that some of these poisonous plants, and white snakeroot is definitely included in this, in that they also have some very positive attributes as well, especially when we talk about the beneficial insects, right? It's a food source for a lot of these beneficial insects. It's a native plant. So in that regard, if you don't have cattle on the landscape and you don't have a lot of people like general public moving through, or at least the people who are on that landscape are educated about what that plant is, we can work to safely incorporate this plant and highlight its benefits on that landscape. So this plant is in the aster family, right? So it's a composite. So it has that composite flower structure, which likens it to being beneficial for a lot of beneficial insects that will tend to go after the composite flowers. So we can have beneficial insects such as the leafcutter bee, the halictid bee, the syrphid fly. The syrphid fly, of course, is very beneficial for going after aphids and some other pests as well. We also have the tachinid fly, which is a generalist predator, and it can go after a bunch of different insects on the landscape, one of which can even be the Japanese beetle. We also have the bee fly that this plant can attract, various types of butterflies, moths, and wasps. In terms of moths, like I've seen a bunch of different kinds of skippers visit the flower of this plant. And again, this plant will usually be avoided by most herbivores, and that can be the large herbivores such as cattle, but we can also talk about the smaller herbivores too, like the rabbits, the voles, rats. All those guys tend to leave this plant alone, right? So this is a beneficial insectary plant that you usually don't have to be worried about being eaten or consumed in any meaningful quantity by various animals that you might have to be concerned about for other plants. So for me personally, because I know this plant can spread both by seeds and by rhizomes, I intend to cut the flowers off shortly after flowering, once they kind of finish, to kind of minimize seed production, right? So I can kind of help to include this plant in the landscape, but not let it be a major factor in my garden area, right? Because I really want to prioritize the growing of edible crops, but I'm happy to include this plant in the landscape in smaller amounts so I can get some of the benefits from it. And I don't have any cattle or anything like that at this time that I really have to worry about, but I know that this plant from past experience can also form fairly dense stands, right? Especially in like partial sun, partial shade type conditions. Thank you so much for checking out this video on the white snakeroot, right? We know a little bit more about what it is now and some pros and some cons, right? That can kind of help to inform us whether we want it on our specific landscape or not. So thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in a future video. Take care.